All right, good evening. If we could all take a seat, we can get started here. My name is Kevin Gettings, and I'm with WSOS Radio 103.9 in St. Augustine in Ponte Vedra, and I have the privilege of trying to moderate this evening, and my only job really is to go around and make sure that all of you have an opportunity to ask whatever questions you'd like. So once these gentlemen are through making their brief presentation, if you could just raise your hand, I will come to you and hold the microphone, and you can ask them whatever questions you would like. You should know that we're also on a Zoom feed at the moment, so that there's some people who are unable to leave their homes. They're watching this by Zoom, and so they'll be allowed to submit some questions too. So in addition to taking your questions, we'll also get some questions from those that are at home or at their offices watching via Zoom. If any of you would like to ask any questions privately, one-on-one, these gentlemen will be available in the back left corner where there's a computer monitor up right now. They'll take your questions there one-on-one after our meeting is over tonight, okay? So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Damon, and he'll introduce Al, and we'll move forward.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. Not a very large crowd, so hopefully we'll get through it rather quickly. I am Damon Douglas. I'm the coastal manager with St. Johns County, and we take care of all the beach restoration projects that are going on along the county's 42 miles of beach. And we are here to talk about a project in Ponte Vedra, and the engineer for this is Al Browder with Olson Associates. So they have done the work to get the permits for us on the project and putting together the packages for bid. And so he is a wealth of knowledge about the technical details of what we're proposing to do. So I'll jump right into it. We're just going to talk a little bit about the project itself, the schedule, and the next steps that we have to go through in order to get there to sand on the beach. So when we came to this, the community came to us after Matthew and Irma. There was this substantial damage. We all had to get together at that time. What's the goal? So what we're looking for is to fully restore the beach, not only the dunes, but the flat part of the beach as well, to improve protection and all of the other values that a beach brings. So you can see from some sample images here, there were some serious damages. This area has experienced erosion over the years. 2.4 million cubic yards of sand lost since 1986. A cubic yard of sand, a cubic yard is about the dimensions of the box that a dishwasher comes in. Just to think about it, 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot. Really, the storms are what pushed us over the edge. So during the hurricanes, there was a big spike in the erosion. We lost a lot of sand during that time period. So it's to the point where the beach is not functioning optimally to protect the properties from continuing storms and the long-term background erosion. So what we're looking at is the entirety of the beaches in Ponte Vedra Beach. So it's almost 9 miles long from the Duval County line down to the Guana's oceanfront beach park there. We are talking about placing 2 million cubic yards of sand to bring the beach back up and restore the dunes. So this has been a long process. We originally started talking to some of the property owners in mid-2017. And there's been a lot of work as far as permits. We have multiple permits, the DEP, the Army Corps of Engineers, and a lease from the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management that required consultation with numerous federal and state agencies. And to add a little more nuance to the goal, as we looked at this, going through several iterations of work with FEMA and other areas from damages, they have a standard that if you have a beach that's considered an engineered beach that's damaged, they can participate in restoring the sand lost. So some of you may have seen we did some FEMA berms, the Dune Enhancement Project, that went on last year and a little bit of the year before that. And that's a much smaller scale thing. It's just a patch on the front of the dune. FEMA has a different program where if it's an engineered beach, they can come back and put back what was lost, or actually fund us accomplishing that. Likewise, as we're moving forward with this, we have been fortunate to be able to secure over $30 million from the state of Florida. Just recently, this last legislative session, there was an unprecedented $25 million special appropriation specifically for this project. The county had been putting money in the budget before this. The previous pattern is we would budget a certain amount of money to go to the next step or partially fund construction, and the state legislature would match that money through an appropriation. But this $25 million is just a seed change. So, a little bit about the beach. There is variations in the beach, as we've seen if you've ever ridden down the whole beach. There's a whiter, sandier area towards the north, and a lot of that is sand that drifts down in the prevailing north to south flow from the Army Corps projects in Jacksonville Beach. And then it transitions into more of the Shelley Coquina down towards the Guana Beach Park. So that sand coming from the Duval project has really been at least matching most of the erosion that didn't come from storms in that northern 1/3 of the project area, roughly 3 miles there. So we've tried to match this to the actual different areas of the beaches. So this is what it looks like when they actually do the project. We're bringing sand from offshore. As you may have seen the last time, they trucked in sand from from an upland mine, and they had to transfer the sand onto off-road trucks and drive all the way down the beach, put it in place, shape it. This type of project that we're proposing uses sand from an offshore source. We'll see a little bit more detail on that later. But basically, the sand is pumped onto the beach in a slurry of water. It comes on the beach much faster. It results in a much larger project. Takes less time as well. So this is an engineered design of the beach. This is something that we look at to talk about different elevations and that type of thing. But it's really for the purpose of experts in the field to discuss the nuances. When you look at this is not what the beach looks like. The beach will wind up looking more like this. So basically, they've compressed the horizontal axis so that we can fit it on one page so that we can talk about it. So this is really the best way to look at it, but don't look at this and see the steep slopes on the dunes and think that there's going to be really steep slopes there. Those are compressed. So as you can see from here, it's a much more gentle slope, and it's a much wider, less invasive type of design. But what we can look at here is that we're going to bring the flat part of the beach up and out towards the ocean. So it'll be at 8 foot above sea level. The area that we see here, the dashed line that you see at the top of the blue, that's the mean high water line. That's the average elevation of high tides throughout the year without the waves on top of them. So you can see that that dash line continues to the very heavy dark line there. That's the existing grade in 2019. In this particular area, you see at the top right-hand corner, this is around the 1,000 block. The different, as I said before, the different sections of the beach look a little different. They'll be treated a little different in that, what do we have to do to reach this uniform type of design that we're talking about? So as you can see, that where that dash line hits the heavy black line to where it comes out to where there's now a intersects with the blue, we're moving that point where the high tide comes up to much further away from the homes. And that's your main protection, is that big flat part of the beach that the waves will break on as the tides, there's a storm surge, the tides are much higher than normal, there's waves on top of it, is that they break further away from the dunes. The dunes are also there to help if they are impacted, that sand washes off the dunes onto the flat part. So it gets sand back on the flat part as the flat part is eroded during a storm. So this is the plan, should provide a good amount of protection. So the sand is in this orange area here. So it's about 4 miles offshore from the southern end of the project. It is in roughly 30, 40 foot of water. A ship will come, and we'll see in the next couple of slides here what that looks like. But basically, they go out to the site, they pick up the sand, they bring it close to the shore, and then pump it onto the shore with pipes. So this is what that looks like. This is the type of ship that goes out there. In this middle picture, that's the drag head that you then see on the right. They drag those along the floor of the ocean where it's been permitted, approved, made sure that it doesn't going to have bad impacts. These are just sandbars that are in deep water out in the ocean. So it sucks up sand from the seafloor, puts it into the hold of the boat there, the hopper, and the boat sails back to shore where it will connect to a pipe in the near shore system over in this the left-hand side. So the pipe is, say, a quarter mile at the most off of shore. It's just outside of the wave area, a floating pipe with a connection. The boat connects to that, and they pump the sand and water onto the shore. And once it hits the shore, as a slurry here that we see, they have bulldozers in the slurry mix that push the sand up out of it so that the water can run back off, the seawater runs back into the ocean. And from this, they construct the beach. This picture is actually from a project that we did in South Ponte Vedra. So a lot of information here that's really pertinent to how does it affect the oceanfront property owner. This moves very quickly. As they're doing this, they're building the beach, they're adding pipe to the segment, they move fairly quickly down the beach. They do 400 to 600 feet a day under good conditions. So you really shouldn't have this operation itself, the slurry pit and the active shaping of the sand for more than, say, 2 to 4 days in front of any given property. Now, if inclement weather, there's a nor'easter, there's some kind of mechanical problem, it can stall their progress. And this pipe that you see on the beach that's pumping, they'll have multiple connections that come in from the ocean that they can connect to. They'll connect to a pipe, there's an elbow, it goes a certain amount of distance down the beach, and then they'll flip it over and go the other way. And there'll be multiple pipes. So that pipe is put down and then picked back up. So they don't leave the pipe on the beach for very long. It's only there for, say, a week to a month in front of any given property. While it's there, they will have to put sand ramps across it. So as long as you're not in the active zone, like in this area here where you see all the heavy equipment, the pipes, the trailers, they wouldn't want people walking through that area. So they'll fence off that particular section. It might be 1,500, 1,000 feet that they need to fence off for safety. That fence will move as they progress, but outside that fence, even if there's a pipe, you'll be able to walk over the pipe to enjoy the ocean during construction. And this is what a typical project like this looks like when it's done. You can see on the ocean edge there's starting to show a little bit of erosion. And that's an intentional process. That's called equilibration. So I'm going to zoom back to that engineered beach profile that we looked at earlier. And if you look at the bottom right-hand side, it says prediction of equilibrated profile. What that means is that section, that dashed line that you see inside the blue, is where we want the sand to be to help those waves break further out. So we know we can't, push the ocean back and put the sand down and let the water come back. So the way we accomplish that is that we put extra sand up on the dry beach, knowing that the waves are going to hit it, and they'll pull it down into the near shore system, those sandbars where you typically see the waves breaking. So the beach will be built out much further than we anticipate it being within the next few months. That process happens very quickly. So 2 to 3 months, you'll see that a lot of that sand right on the fore area has moved into the near shore system. And that's the process that we saw here, is that sand is beginning to pull out into the sandbars immediately offshore. So we have some items that we'll talk about in next steps. There are some surveys as far as property owner surveys and easements from property owners. So we've got maybe 2 to 4 months to work on that. Then we have to put this project out to bid. We put together a very substantial set of plans and specifications as to how a firm has to accomplish the work described in the plans. That's advertised for a period of time, and these companies have an opportunity to bid on it. We'll make a lot of noise so that they hear us. There's only 5 or 6 firms that have this kind of equipment, and they're very busy. They do this all over the coastline. So 3 to 4 months it will take to advertise the bid, receive the bids, pick out the lowest bidder, and go through the contracting process of getting everything executed, their insurance, their construction bonds, all the things that we need to let them go on the beach. And then once we give them notice that they may proceed, it'll take them roughly 2 months to bring all of the equipment. They'll float that pipe that you saw, they'll float that in from offshore. At least one large dredge vessel will come. They may bring 2 and be able to work either both ships working one pipeline or work simultaneous pipelines. And then construction, once they actually get underway, should be around 5 to 6 months to do the entire 9 miles, and then pack up and get out of there. That includes planting sea oats over any portions of the dunes that are restored and constructed. So some of the to-do items, one of the permit requirements from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection involves the execution of a state law that says if you're going to do any kind of project like this where you push out where the mean high water level intersects with the beach, that mean high water line, if you will, is that you have to memorialize where that line was before you push out the beach. That line, since the founding of Florida, has been the boundary between the upland properties and the underwater property that's owned by the state of Florida. So statute says that the state has to memorialize where that line is to say, well, this is where state property was, and if there's additional sand added, that's still state property. So we've already surveyed that line. August 29th, they went out, they find what is that elevation? At a certain elevation above sea level, that's where they've studied it for 19.1 years as an epoch. And the DEP has levels, and it actually changes from beach to beach where the level of that is because of the way that the ocean shapes itself. So they come down the beach and they find, well, where exactly, if I go this way and then come back, there's the level. And they mark that point, and then they connect a series of points to come up with where the line is. They've done that. We've got that line mapped out. The DEP has a workshop and a public hearing on the 26th at the GTM Visitor Center on Guana River Road, 6 p.m. We are hosting them there. Basically, the workshop we'll go through a lot of what we talked about tonight. What is the project? What are we going to do? Why are we here doing that workshop? What is an erosion control line? Why is it required? What laws pertain to it? Discuss the whole process, and then have time for question and answer and discussion and that type of thing. And then immediately after that's done, the DEP hearing officer does a public hearing and basically do the same thing again. Describe and brief the project. He will read the statutes that talk about why, what an erosion control line is and why he has to do it. And then give a period for people to provide any testimony that they may have a parcel that they feel that should not apply to. This is very, very rare cases where someone has a deed from the state of Florida after it was created, or there's a continuous ownership from the land grant from the King of Spain, those type of things. Very, very rare. They go through that process. We have the hearing. That's over with. There's a period of a few weeks where or actually a week where they receive comments. Anyone else has any property they feel it shouldn't pertain to, and then they work towards establishing this erosion control line. And then we're allowed to do our project. So another step is with the property owners, we need easements to be able to do the work on the beach. So as we know, the beach is subject to customary use. People can walk on the beach, ride their bikes, put a towel down, swim, whatever. But what's not really customary is construction on the beach. So those rules, those laws that are in place don't enable us to do this work without a specific easement from the property owners. So we just did the FEMA berms, got hundreds of easements. We had another storm come. We knew that this project was coming. We said, let's try and get an easement that covers multiple types of projects. We could do this project, we can do FEMA projects as they come on board. Instead of coming back to these people every few months and try and get a new easement, we came up with a generic easement that will work, allow us to do all this work. We have, I believe that as of tonight, we have 220 out of the 272 in this specific project area. So if you have not granted an easement and you would like to, we will get you in touch with the real estate division at the county, and they can help you execute an easement. If you have already sent in an easement, you have any questions about it, we'll be glad to discuss that with you. This is something we have to have before we can do the project. And with a project like this, where we saw, the project moving down the beach, it is extremely difficult to work around holdouts where there's not an easement. As you can see, if we're extending the beach out for a couple of 100 feet and there's a gap there, that's kind of it really weakens the protective value of the work and the new beach and causes a point where erosion can exacerbate. So we're really trying to get all of the easements. Or at least, as county staff, we want to make sure everyone knows that there's an easement, that there's a project, and that they have the opportunity to participate. And we can work around, a couple or a few parcels. It's not optimal, but we can't have large gaps in the project, and we can't have areas where it's every other house. The dune projects that are much smaller, it's a lot easier to deal with situations like that, even though those are not optimal work conditions. But with this one, we really need to see if the community wants this to go forward, that they're all coming together and providing the permissions for us to do this work. So we're talking about project funding. We believe that this project could cost around $40 million to construct. We have $38.4 million so far. So there's a potential construction shortfall. As we talked about, we're going to put it out to bid. We may get bids that are under our estimate. We really try to estimate so they're not going to be over the estimate, but that's within the realm of possibility. A lot of this depends upon the price of diesel at the time and the work schedule of all of the companies, the handful that are able to do this work at the time that it's put out. There are also out-year costs as far as the permits require that we monitor the beach, how it affects endangered species, the performance of the sand, where the sand is. So we're legally required to monitor the beach physically and as far as like biological function of the beach for a period of years. And in order to be an engineered beach for FEMA's consideration, there needs to be some kind of plan for future maintenance. Now, what we're talking about not tonight is not a set period of coming back and repairing this. This funding is to do it one time. So as we come up to the point where we need to do it again, whether it's for some kind of event or because we've been fortunate there hasn't been an event and it's starting to wear, we will come back and talk to the community about doing it again. And there will be a separate funding effort at that time. We'll, of course, always try and get as much support as we can from the state and federal level, and we may be talking to the property owners about funding a portion of it. So as we embarked upon this effort in 2018, the community members that really spearheaded this effort realized that there was going to be some kind of funding needed for this. So they worked with the county to set up what's called municipal service taxing units. We had some meetings just like this one in this room in 2018. Surveys were mailed out to all of the property owners to see if they wanted to participate in one of these taxing units. At that time, it was a phase one to provide funding for all of the planning and permitting and design work that we've embarked upon. Those MSTUs, there was an MSTU created. There was no money levied on it. So there was never any tax that was required in that unit. The county commission had decided that they were going to fund all of the work that we've been doing collectively here. And there's been a substantial amount of discussion in the board with the community. And in 21, they split the MSTU into two MSTUs. So now in that yellow area, the northern 3 miles is a separate taxing district than the green area in the southern 6 miles. And again, no millage has ever been levied. So we do have that shortfall in construction, and we do have the monitoring and planning expenses. So the board has directed us to come to you and talk to you. The taxing district's already in place, but they haven't levied anything. Before they actually levy anything, they want to know, are the property owners in that area, which the areas include all of the oceanfront properties, the properties west of Ponte Vedra Boulevard in the project area. They've asked us to survey those property owners to see if they're willing to participate in an up to amount. So every year, as part of the normal budget process, for any taxing units, like there is a fire municipal service taxing unit that's county-wide. So every year, the county has to say, this year we're going to levy this amount for fire. And there are other MSTUs in different areas for different purposes. So what they're asking is, in the northern area, if you live in those northern 3 miles, would you be willing to have a levy of up to 0.39 mils? So a mil is 1/10 of 1%. So this is roughly 0.04 of 1%. That covers 20% of the potential construction shortfall, because the northern 3 miles, it's been getting sand from Duval County. It doesn't need as much sand as the southern area. So roughly 20% of the sand, the effort to place sand, is in that northern 3 miles. And it's 1/3 of the total 9 miles that will have to have, surveyors on the ground and biological experts, counting turtle nests and behavior around the turtles and that type of thing. So it's 1/3 of the monitoring and planning expenses. The southern 6 miles, that MSTU, they're asking, are you willing to have a levy of up to 0.75 mils? And again, that's 80% of the construction shortfall roughly, and 2/3 of the monitoring and planning expenses. So
just the oceanfront property or both sides?
just the ocean front. That's where the taxing districts were created. So we can follow up on that in a little more detail, but I want to show you what the example is. What does that mean? So we put together a table here. If you have a property that's the taxable value, that's after your exemptions, is worth $1 million. The taxable value that they levy the taxes against is $1 million. That's $390 in a single year of the 0.39, that up to amount, or $750 if you're in the southern 6 miles for 1 year at the 0.75. And then we've taken a tax bill at random out of all of the properties. This is a screenshot from a little section of the report on the property appraiser's page. You can all go on the St. Johns County Property Appraiser, look up your particular property and see, what is the taxable value. You can see that this parcel has some exemptions, and it's been owned in a homestead for a long period of time. So a lot of the current market value, the potential $5.158 million of market value, the taxable value is only around 1.9 million. So in that table there, the sample, they would pay, if it was in the northern 3 miles, it would be $735 in that year. If they were in the southern 6 miles, it's $1,413. So surveys have been mailed out to all of the property owners at the same address that they received their tax bill. If you've not received your survey, please reach out to us, provide us your contact information. We can email it to you and work with you if you'd like to fill it out. You can circle either agree or disagree. If you disagree with this, you can express that. If you want to support it, you can express that. So this is the language of the actual survey. There's about 1.5 pages explaining what the survey is, what the project is, and then on a single page, this is what we're talking about doing, and do you agree with it or not? Same thing for the southern 6 miles with the 0.75 mils. So to summarize the next steps, we will be working to get all of as many surveys and easements as we can. You know, even if you are opposed to the project, it's not my job to try and convince you to participate, but it is my job to make sure that you're aware that there is a survey out there and you have an opportunity to express yourself. December 1st. All of the surveys need to be mailed back by December 1st so they can be considered by the Board of County Commissioners. We expect that first meeting in December 5th, that the board will look at this and receive the results of the survey. We can assist if you know of a property owner that's not available, needs to do this online. That's possible as well. We've set up an account with DocuSign, so we can sign it online, cost the taxpayers money. So if you don't mind filling out the paper copy and mailing it back or emailing it to us, that works. But we can do DocuSign as well. And then the erosion control line, October 26th, we'll have that hearing and workshop. And then it's in the Board of County Commissioners court in order to decide to tell us to move forward. We're working on the back end diligently to get this thing advertised as quickly as possible. And our hope is that we can have this advertised before the board decides whether it wants to move forward or not. We can pull the bid and say, we're no longer doing this, thank you for looking at it, but we're not receiving bids if they tell us to stop. But we want to do everything we can to get the sand going on the beach as quickly as possible. We would really like to have it done before the peak of next hurricane season. It's doubtful that we could get bids back in time for the December 5th meeting, but we want to get as far along in that process as we possibly can. So once we do have those bids back, the board has to approve the construction contract, which will, at that point, we'll have the actual amount that it costs. And then we can move forward. So I've got some contact information here. We have some cards in the room that takes you to the website, has our email address, phone number. There's multiple phones in the office. Get this calls from this number. So please reach out to us. At this point, if you have some questions, we can talk about anything you want to talk about.
My name's Joe Walker. I live at 323 Ponte Vedra Boulevard, which is about 10 or 15 houses south of the club. Two major areas. One, I understand from talking to you people that if we do with this project, there will be a requirement to increase access to the beach, and there will be some sort of a trolley system set up for our area to bring people to the existing beach access points.
So that is not a requirement of this project. We did ask, can the Army Corps institute a project like they have in St. Augustine Beach, where the federal government pays a portion of it. If it's damaged, instead of talking to FEMA about it, the federal government, the Army Corps, just comes back and fixes it if it is a storm damage. And they do have requirements like that. So that would have been a requirement if they had agreed to participate. We had them do a feasibility study. It was a $3 million, 3-year study, and they did not find that they could do a project in this 9 miles. So that is not a requirement. It's not a requirement of the county project. For future work, even the monitoring, there are opportunities to apply for funding from the DEP, but they require that there is public access in an area that they've designated critically eroded. We don't have that in Ponte Vedra, so we won't be able to pull in that money, but we have no direction to increase public access. This has been a long discussion in Ponte Vedra, and I think that the board is comfortable in their understanding that the community is not interested in adding public access.
Okay. Be sure to tell your people I've called the number and they said there was. But I'm glad to hear there's not.
There is, in South Ponte Vedra, if they have confused the two areas, they are moving forward towards the possibility of having an Army Corps project. So that discussion about the trolleys and parking is going on right now in South Ponte Vedra for the 5 miles immediately north of the Serenata Beach Club.
Okay. Second thing is, I think the people, at least in my area, across the road, the houses are usually 3 or 4 feet lower than the ones on the beach. And if there's a big bad storm, they're going to get some water over on their side too. Plus, they enjoy the wider beach and whatever you're going to do. I would think they ought to pick up a little piece, not as much as the beachside owners, but they ought to pick up some of the cost of the project.
And we have heard that a lot. It could be justified, but that's not the direction that we've had. We have tried that in other areas in South Ponte Vedra. Immediately after Matthew, there was an opportunity from the state that we followed up on. We asked the oceanfront property owners, are you willing to pay a certain amount? And then the folks on the other side of A1A, are you willing to pay a much lesser amount? A much lesser amount. And the outrage was intense. And the board didn't want to move forward with that. There's a lot more people over there. It's harder to make that argument than when your house, your nest egg is right there on the first line from the storms than it is if you're on the other side of a road, you know, that will have some kind of protection during a storm. So I hear you. It's within the realm of possibility. The board could decide to do that, but we haven't had direction to do that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Penny Rosen, and we're at 409 Ponte Vedra Boulevard. We're very much in favor of the project. My concern is about the easement, because during the last whatever they did, they completely messed up our dunes. And they ran out of seeds. They destroyed half our dunes, which are beautifully planted, and only half remain, which are beautifully planted. And I just would not like to lose any more property. But as far as, you know, the amounts, the payment, I think it's all very fair, and I really don't think anybody on the other side needs to get involved, because then we'll never get it done. Thank you.
So we'll say for the FEMA project that we did, it was kind of a different animal. And it was a very minimal amount of sand, and the engineers we had at the time expressed to us the importance of getting the sand as far away from the ocean, piled as high as possible. And it did go into the dunes in a lot of areas. Those areas have sand, and we're not proposing to come into the vegetated dunes this time. The sand that's left from that would remain, but since we're expanding the flat part of the beach, we then have more room that the dune could be built. So any part of the dune that's not already there that needs to be added would be added on that seaward edge. And when we see the design for the dune, we're including areas where there are existing dunes so that we don't have to build that part. But if it's included in the design, if we ever have a really big storm and the dunes are wiped out, then when we go to repair the project and there are discussions with FEMA, they will allow us to include that section for the funding. So it's not going to be as intense, as close to the house as it was before.
Yeah, it was totally raised.
Yeah.
I have several questions. My name is Martha Hayes, and I live on Ponte Vedra Boulevard as well. First of all, just in terms of the funding, we did get approved the bed tax that is set aside specifically for our beach. Is that still in place, and will that help fund the future needs of the beach?
They did add the 5th cent, so it's in place. They do put that money towards there's a Category 5 tourism assets. So a large portion of the collected tourism development tax goes into a fund for beach projects. And so this project and others, that's where some of the funding that the county has already put forward comes from.
But it's an ongoing tax, so it will continue to accumulate and go towards future needs, I'm assuming.
Yes, it is a resource that could be directed to this and other projects. So that's really a policy decision that the elected board would come up with. The staff here, we have
That's
no
my
control
concern,
over that.
is that they can, the ability to move that money when, the agreement was that it would go specifically for the beaches in Ponte Vedra. And a lot of us attended those meetings, and so the question is, what I'm hearing from you is they could move that money if they wanted, even though it's designated for specifically that.
They have wide leeway into how they're allowed to spend that money.
All right, the next part is, I'm a little bit with our first speaker that only taxing the property owners on the beach side when, in our case, there are several people, the houses across the street that have easements and access to the beach, so they don't specifically own it, but they have all the rights of anybody to access it. And so only taxing the property owners, is a little bit frustrating. But you can't change that, only others can, so.
There are some that they actually own a strip for access, and it's not just an easement on someone else's property. They own like a 10-foot strip, and they're included in the taxing district for what that's worth.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is originally back in April or May, I talked to some folks in your department, and we were specifically looking at FEMA money at that point coming back in. Our dunes were actually wiped. The FEMA dunes that were put in were completely wiped out last summer. And so they were talking about new FEMA money coming in. And my understanding from this week is that is not going to happen because of this project. But one of the things that was discussed is the money associated, which was supposed to go to the 9-mile stretch, may be able to be used to help fund this project. Is that a true or false statement?
Yes, we like to, it's true on a couple of different levels, but there are small areas along this 9 miles that would qualify for another round of the FEMA dunes. What we saw last time, the FEMA staff looked at it much differently. They approved a much larger amount of sand, and they allowed us to add together what we would have qualified for in Matthew and Irma. So it was an amount of sand that covered the whole of Ponte Vedra Beach and made sense to do. What we have now is smaller areas with a much smaller amount of sand, and we saw that the impact of all of the trucks, it doesn't make as much sense to pursue that before doing this project. But I will always try and maximize the funding that we can. So the FEMA dune, it's a reimbursement program. So we will give the invoices from this project and say, this part of the dune is where the FEMA dune is, and we'd like to be reimbursed for that amount. We've heard rumors that has worked for others, and we've heard that it has not worked. So we will see with the FEMA, every time that it's a new disaster is almost like a new beast. They use a lot of independent contractors. So we'll see what we get this time. And we are going to try, but I don't want to promise it to you.
Okay, so I have two last topics. One is the easement. It sounds like if we sign the easement already for the second piece of FEMA, that includes this as well.
The ones that we did after Ian and Nicole.
Yeah, okay, that's
Yes.
right. And then the only other thing I'd like to just bring up is I know we like to go with the lowest bidder on a project, but I do think we had some issues with the project with the FEMA. I mean, it stopped and started, took 18 months to get done, stopped and started. I'm not quite sure what all the issues were associated with that, but it was not that well run, and it took a very long time.
Yeah, I had a full head of hair before that
Yeah.
project.
All right.
So it was a design build project. So it was a completely different animal. Quite honestly, you know, it is what it is.
I'm not trying, I
It
just
was
think
also,
we need to look at.
but I do
making
want to
sure-
say it's the important ways that it's different is that it was upland sand and it required a very large fleet of trucks. And this happened towards the tail end of COVID, and there was a huge diesel shortage and a huge shortage of truck drivers. So they had promised that they'd be able to produce so many trucks a day, and less than half of those actually showed up. So this type of project, much faster.
Okay. All right, then my last question was specifically on the high water mark. So kind of underlying everything you said, I think it means that the high water mark, you want to keep it high, or I guess it used to be lower, and then as time's gone on with erosion, it's come up. And so you now want to mark it up higher so that St. Johns County owns more of the beach in the future.
So it's not St. Johns County. This
Okay.
is a
It's state
state
of Florida.
requirement, and
Yeah.
it's state property. So every day, the actual property line is where that high water mark is on that particular day. And it would change really every tide. As you see, when you look down the beach, you know, it's scalloped. There's high points and low points. So those points move down the beach. I've heard the beach described as a river of sand. So it's really daily where that line is and what shape it is changes. So this just sets it into where it is, a snapshot of that particular day. And that state law is that you have to take the survey within so many months of the creation of the erosion control line, within 6 months. So there is nothing that the county can do to change that. And the hearing officer, you know, will be able to answer a lot of these questions. And we've actually asked for some people higher up at the DEP to be there, more policy people to discuss it as well. So they can really get into the details. But we've done this, every project that we have, that's this type of project, we've had to go through this process. So we've done it a few times. St. Augustine Beach has an erosion control line. The Volano North Beach area has an erosion control line, and so does South Ponte Vedra Beach.
Once that line's there, it's there for people.
It's there as long as the project lasts. So if ever the project is, say, deauthorized or decommissioned, or we all agree we're never doing that again, then the state would retract that erosion control line, and it would go back to the normal boundary that changes day to day. You had a...
Hi, my name's David, stakeholder with one of the property owners, but this is a follow-up to the erosion control line question. The surveys were already performed back at the end of August, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said that the surveys are only good for 6 months before the erosion control line is actually memorialized?
Yes.
What actually triggers the memorialization of that? Is that
I'm
bid?
sorry, I didn't hear the last couple things.
Sorry, is this better?
Yes, thank you.
What actually triggers the memorialization of the erosion control line? Bid acceptance or start of construction or?
So it's after that hearing, the workshop and hearing, there's the 1 week response period, and then the hearing officer makes recommendation up the chain that the erosion control line is proper, and they go through a process of review. So it takes really a couple of months after that to go through. Everyone stamps it at the DEP, and then it's recorded in the public records. So
And-
it hinges upon that meeting. It doesn't have to wait until construction.
And if the project falls through, the line is still memorialized?
If the project is dead, then they would not, if it happens, that determination was made before it was recorded, they simply wouldn't record it, and they can rescind it if the project fails completely.
Okay, thank you.
Really quick before we wrap things up, there were 2 questions from people that were watching via Zoom. One was, were easements requested of all property owners regardless of land use?
Yes.
That's easy. Can the slide indicating easement count be revisited
Certainly.
for our friends on Zoom?
Repeat the question. What was the question?
It was the slide indicating easement count.
Oh, I got you.
And I think as today, we've gotten a couple of more since the last meeting. Just a quick conversation as one of the real estate staff was coming through my office to pick someone up to go execute another easement. I think we're up to 220 out of the 272.
That's the one.
And so we have a few months to get the easements. We need to have enough to be able to say to the board, yes, we have enough that we have a viable project. And then some can come in. We can't have it where you want to wait and see what it looks like at the neighbor's house, and so you don't give an easement, and then you run out while the bulldozer's passing you by and do that. That really doesn't work. It's not that fair. Up to construction, but it's important before we let the board make the decision that if you want to be in, then that's the time to do it. Because, they've seen other projects that have had difficulties from gaps in them. So they have to make a decision, are they willing to commit to this project? And if all of the property owners aren't, it's much harder for them to make that.
Okay. One follow-up question from a Zoom person. Of the count of easements indicated, how many were obtained from property owners with non-residential land use?
I don't have that information with me tonight. So there are not that many non-residential properties in the area. And not all of them have participated so far.
Okay. All right. Well, with that said, that wraps up this part of the meeting. They'll be available in the back to answer any additional questions that you have. But thank you very much for coming out tonight. We appreciate it.
I'll put the contact information up. Thank you all. I'll be right down.